It is now 12:01 p.m. on Wednesday, November 27, 2024, the day before Thanksgiving, and I've got a special treat for Kandit's viewers. The third out of the three owners of Kandit Incorporated, for the very first time, is joining us to share his views on Kandit news and views. And so, welcome, Carlos Pangelinan.
Thanks, Troy.
So, the reason that we're having this conversation is, Carlos he has many views. He espouses many, and they're always interesting viewpoints. And I thought the most interesting thing that he's talked about recently is why the Democrats screwed up the 2024 presidential election. And I'm not sure if he has any views on the local elections or how it affected the local elections. But Carlos, tell us, what are your thoughts on Democrats and how they messed it up?
Um, on a national level, that's pretty obvious. Um, I tend to think that uh, you had one candidate who clearly had a connection with a lot of voters and another one who kind of disillusioned them.
How? How did she disillusion them?
Well, she just didn't seem, I don't know how to, I guess it was sort of like um, there was, I guess it started with you know what is, she had like 90 days to campaign. She only had about 4 months, right?
Yeah.
So she had the honeymoon at the very first month. But like in a natural election cycle, a candidate would eventually come across hard-hitting interviews and would have to respond. And then people would really get to know them, right? So she didn't really have very much time to do that. And I guess the initial response, so she had a very strong starting with her convention, and then she was ahead in the polls by about maybe 4 or 5 points, a little less, but never really that far ahead. And I think, the first thing before going into her performance as a candidate, the weight would be stacked up against the incumbent anyway, particularly with inflation, particularly with the post-COVID economy. Um, and I think one of the key things that I guess really uh, handicapped her was the fact that she ran a very traditional campaign.
Okay.
She was very, and I guess the way she would respond to questions, were typical of a conventional candidate. Uh, Pretty scripted, pretty well rehearsed, and I think the problem is people saw that. That's the sense I got, because you know maybe not everyone would realize it, but at least for me, when I hear her respond to questions about her positions in the past, there never was a clear response. And I think maybe to her own fault, she's just a very honest person, right? So you wouldn't say, and as an honest person, you're not going to uh, say things that would be disingenuous because you don't want, maybe those things that are really in your heart aren't very popular with a lot of people. And that's kind of the impression I got. And then I think the other part is also, I guess, with Trump, um, he seems to have cultivated and captured a lot of, I guess, they call them, and that's the term that they were throwing out this election was low propensity voters, people that don't technically vote very often. There's a lot of people that didn't vote. So he was like, Trump did Joe Rogan, which really helped him.
And Kamala Harris didn't.
No, she deliberately avoided it.
Do you think that
those
was a
types of
fatal
things.
mistake, or
I I think it hurt her. I think it hurt her because they have what's called in this particular election, and if you follow the news, there's a new forum, and that is younger male voters. They call it the manosphere. And the manosphere includes a number of things, includes podcasts, social media, a bunch of YouTube. You have people like the Nelk Boys. These are people that are very popular with 30 and under.
and these are
Uh,
long form interviews and people paying attention to more than the
yeah,
sound bites, which is what the mainstream media typically
yeah,
provides to uh, those engaged, right?
yeah. And then there's also, and these are this social media also extends to video gaming.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
I just heard about some platform like it's called Twitch or something like that,
mhm,
and
mhm.
it's mainly video gaming, but people exchange all kinds of dialogue on this platform. Younger people.
So yeah, it especially younger men. And remember, the Democrats were really banking on the woman voter coming out, right? Um, but the problem with that, but the problem with trying to run on a issue such as abortion is that, number one, it wasn't the most important issue apparently. Number two, it didn't really bring out women. It didn't motivate women to come out as much as they thought because the while Trump may have appointed judges and justices that have really scaled back women's rights, and the rollback of Roe v. Wade, he kept going on and saying, I'm never gonna sign a national
National.
abortion ban,
Yeah.
and people heard that.
And
So
it's
that was on the so it and then I guess the approach that Kamala's campaign took also was kind of, you're working really hard to get the women's vote, but you're not, you know, what does that mean to the 30 something male, regardless of whether they're white, right?
mhm.
You had a lot of these, to me, it's like a lot of social issues were there's a lot of social underpinnings that were occurring. There was a lot of undercurrents. And I think it's sort of like there was this particular group probably would not have been this younger male voting group, and a lot of the pundits would say, well, they can actually swing back and forth. But the thing about it is they some of them probably didn't really pay too much attention to political stuff until Trump went on their forums. So
The Republicans, not just Trump, but the Republicans throughout the country in state elections, national elections, even the elections here in Guam and to an extent in the CNMI,
mhm.
to have been able to galvanize um, and uh, have voters coalesce around their just how upset they are about things like, I mean, it comes down to basically a theme of we're not being heard. I'm a common everyday citizen. I don't have any power. These people who are in power, and the Democrats, they were in power, right? They're the ones who have been in
Yeah,
power. These people who are in power, they're too elitist. They don't speak my language. And I pay so much in groceries and
but
payments and all that.
look at what the irony is. These are issues that made the Democratic Party powerful.
And so, what are your thoughts on the
Yeah.
Democratic Party now then?
So I think what happened is you know the reality, and we'll just go back to like when Bill Clinton won, the first time around, it was the economy, right?
Yeah,
And the facts are is that the United States had the strongest recovery of all developed countries. That's
yeah,
a fact. but it still didn't speak to the reality of most people, you know, going to the grocery, buying a carton of milk, or a carton of eggs, or and milk. These are, these are issues. The reality is that even though inflation may have tapered off and is reduced on a quarterly basis, it's still 30 to 40% more today than it was several years ago.
And Kamala Harris
So,
and Joe Biden kind of they seemed to be a bit dismissive of those facts. They kept talking about a stronger economy, but they never really talked about, the economy facing every family, just the regular,
yeah, or
right?
there are many opportunities that they could have used to, well, this is what I did to try to fix this, and this is what we plan to do. So there wasn't enough of that, and it was just all, Donald Trump is a Nazi, Donald Trump is the worst thing ever. So it it did they lost their and I'm a registered Democrat, you're a registered Democrat, Troy,
Hmm.
and we tend to be, I would consider ourselves to be kind of in the middle
Yeah,
on most issues. But the Democratic Party is supposed to be for the working people, right?
yeah.
So was this election strategy centered around that by the Democratic Party?
No, it was centered around social
No,
issues.
it
I thought that
wasn't.
there was a great missed opportunity when and it's only being discussed now after the election, but I thought that the Democrats on a national stage missed the opportunity to go after Trump on his tariffs plan and
Yeah,
how
and
that would increase our prices, especially here in Guam and the CNMI.
well, they could have attacked him on how that might have affected jobs. They could have uh, you know it. I mean, there's a lot of things that the fact that he's supported by the richest man in the world. I think they did try to capitalize on that a little, try to uh, associate, but that wasn't the prevailing theme. It it seemed like the Democratic Party kind of was in a vacuum, uh, coastal elite, college educated, um, you know, say all the right things politically because it's kosher, it's socially acceptable, it's politically correct. And then you have someone like Trump, even though he's a billionaire, acting like he talks to his supporters as though he were at the bar with a bunch of truck drivers.
Yeah,
What did he do just days before the election? He went to McDonald's and served fries.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, he's a genius marketer, that's for sure.
So and they say, well, he's convinced people, a lot of Democrats are now saying, well, he's convinced people of the wrong realities well, he did. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I don't know. He certainly was able to pull a lot of people toward his side, toward his uh they find him socially acceptable.
And do they find it
Relatable.
socially acceptable and relatable because the Democrats sort of legitimized, and it's not necessarily just Republicans, but people who voted for Trump, they legitimized the Democrats' campaign and what the things they focused on, and really how a lot of supporters treated Trump people might have legitimized what Trump people thought about Democrats and Kamala Harris.
Mhm.
That whole elitism, the I'm better than you, I'm
Yeah,
going
well,
with these comments
what
and
think about
condescension.
what Barack Obama did. He chastised black men. He said that you're supposed to vote for our girl. You didn't say why. He just said it's because you're just supposed to.
Yeah,
You know that you just do what I tell you because I know better.
It was
You know,
condescending, is what you're saying.
it was very condescending, and I don't care what anyone thinks. I think Biden, when he did the whole trash remark,
Yeah.
garbage remark, I think he did that on purpose. That's my conspiracy theory. And it's probably because my it seems like it was Kamala didn't end up running if it weren't for Biden at the last minute deciding I'm going to make my VP run.
Yeah.
Since you're not going to let me run, I'm going to make that decision for the party. So then they avoided having a long drawn out convention and actual potential candidates, other candidates to uh, participated or vied for the nomination. Um, I think it probably was a mistake to not pick Pennsylvania Governor Shapiro.
Okay.
Uh, but I understand what the reasons are for that. It's because I guess it might have affected the Michigan Arab vote because he's a Jew, and it's a very sensitive issue. Uh, what's going on in Gaza and Israel. So, but yeah, there's a lot of things. I mean, you could point to, but I think you know, I wasn't surprised when Trump won.
I wasn't
Um,
surprised either. And I mean, in the days leading up to the election, the polls were pretty clear that Trump was going to win the election.
well, yeah, because we were all thinking, well, he always underperformed polling, so and
And the moving forward on this for the Democratic Party, right? I mean, for the Republican Party, it seems to be much more of a simple task, which is to govern and to perform and um uh, well, maybe not that much more simple. Let me take that back. But
Mhm.
they're going into the next election, both the midterms and the presidential elections, as the party in power with the ability to make decisions that will benefit them and their prospects for reelection and all that stuff, right? Whether they fail at it, that's up to them. But for the Democrats, it's now an uphill battle, I think, because they have to do this autopsy on where they went wrong. They have to accept where they went wrong. And then they have
Mhm.
to go through the pains of making changes and bringing people back together, even though they might not agree with those changes. And so, where does the party go from here and how do you see things happening for them?
I think for Democrats, the good news is can be illustrated by what recently was said by Bill Clinton in his book that just came out.
What is that?
Uh, a political defeat is never permanent, nor is a political triumph or victory.
Okay.
So, and of all people who would understand that, it would be him. Because what did Bill Clinton do to win the presidency? He moved a little bit to the right.
Yeah.
You know, he went to themes that resonated with most people,
Yeah.
and then he won his election.
Yeah.
And that's just basically what the Democrats have to do. You know, they have to be mindful of issues that are of concern to middle America. You can't just be stuck in a silo in San Francisco or Seattle or Boston or New York and pretend that the rest of the country is like that, which it isn't. And demographically, a lot of these people, there's a lot of people moving into other states such as Texas, Arizona, Nevada. Um, there's a lot of cultural shifts. And for now, I think the one thing that Democrats might have to worry about within the next couple of years, uh, well, I don't know when the next census is going to be. I think it was like every 10 years, right? So, but because of population shifts from coastal to
Midland.
middle America to southern and uh, Midwest states, or anywhere where, primarily for economic reasons, it may change the makeup
Of the
of
House.
congressional seats.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that they have to worry about long term. Um, but look at what Republicans have done to, at least since 2020, which was a terrible election for them. There was no red wave.
Yeah.
Uh, so what did they do? It's like one of the first things they did was work on trying to get more Hispanic candidates, emphasize more, try to tailor their messaging
Yeah.
Hispanic. So, the parties have to adjust and they have to adapt. Um, and Republicans would be nowhere if they didn't do that right now.
The other
They
thing,
you know.
the other thing that concerns me, in the wake of the 2024 elections is the credibility of what the far right calls the mainstream media, or your networks and your
Uh-huh.
big publications like the New York Times and the San Francisco Chronicle, USA Today, CNN, MSNBC. They really hate MSNBC, ABC, or is it ABC that they really hate? I can't remember. Well, anyway, just the credibility of these legacy newsrooms who are comprised of just the best journalists out there, uh
Uh-huh.
really do good work to bring international and national news coverage into our homes. Their credibility being eroded on a daily basis, uh through echo chambers, and just the resonance of echo chambers in the lives of the American public and the voters. I
Uh-huh.
think this is a real threat to democracy, and to civil engagement. How can the media, these mainstream media outlets, so-called, begin to rebuild credibility with more than half the nation?
Well, I think they're already starting to a degree. Um, I think it was Morning Joe. Who's that talk show host on MSNBC? Joe.
Lester Holt? Oh, is that ABC? I can't remember.
MSNBC. Joe. Morning Joe. I forget
Oh,
his
yes,
last.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He did him and his co-host actually did an interview with Trump. It was actually a surprise interview. None of their viewers knew about it being planned. And one of the things they were saying was that from that point on, they're not going to be talking about Trump. They're going to be talking to Trump. So I guess that's an attempt. And then you have some of the major media owners. You have the Wolves. I think it was a Washington Post. You have owners of these major, like there were conscientious decisions not to endorse candidates.
Yeah.
Traditionally, they would always endorse the Democrat, but they didn't do it this time. And I don't know if that's because maybe the owners were fearing the wrath of Trump because he's like talked about doing all sorts of things in the FCC or arena. But at least one of the owners, I think it was I don't know if it was the LA Times. He's an Asian man. LA, I don't know, San Francisco Chronicle, possibly.
No, I think it's the LA Times that refused to for the first
Yeah.
time since the 1960s, didn't do an endorsement or something.
So even the owner was saying, well, he thinks that the paper, and mind you, this is a paper that's always been to the left for the longest time. He admitted that it went a little too far in recent years. So I think the media just needs to. They just need, I don't think it's hard to restore credibility. You just have to report the way, if you try to be a credible journalist, that it's in your interest to show that you're not always siding
What do you think they can at least start with revealing their biases, authors and anchors and hosts, just revealing their biases in the beginning or disclosing where they might have a problem with objectivity, and then leaving it to readers and viewers to decide for themselves after that. That's something we do. I don't know
Yeah.
is it the kind of
Well,
work on a national level.
I mean, I think the thing about it though is that I mean, you look at the market, right? You have CNN, you have MSNBC, you have Fox News, you have all these different organizations, and they have clear biases.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they hide that fact. But I think if you want, I don't know what it's going to take to have a strong, non-biased news organization, but uh, I guess it's just, I mean, it's different today, right? You have a lot of social media.
Yeah.
You have alternative venues for people's being able to digest what they see and hear and read. Um, I don't think that there's ever going back to the time of Walter Cronkite.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm sure that news organizations will have to adjust in light of all the other things that are going on in the undercurrent. And I mean, I I don't know. I mean, my guess is I don't worry too much about it. I don't think that they're going to disappear. I think they're just going to, even if certain news organizations fall, there will always be a market for uh, non-right wing viewers.
What about
So
what about how vitriolic and condescending some, or some would say many, on the left have been toward people on the right, or at least, more toward the center?
well,
What advice do you have for people who are hurting because they don't like the results of the election, and they're commenting online on Facebook and Twitter and all these
I think
platforms?
I think it's for me it's more of an individual thing. And I think uh, the best, the person that seems to have gotten it right, I mean, in my opinion, on the left, is Bill Maher.
Okay.
And what he would always say to people is, you can't cancel these people out. You can't cancel middle America out. You can't cancel, your conservative friends or your conservative
Yeah.
relatives. You just have to accept them, that these are real people. They're not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
And if you want to win an election, you're just going to have to convince them. So,
And
you
there's no convincing people by insulting them.
yeah, well, insulting people never works, right?
It's
What,
just the
what, what do
wrong
you
way to
think?
try to do it.
If you insult me, if I insult you, what do you think you're going to do? You're going to try to one up on me. It's just going to go back and forth. It's just really a matter of numbers at that point. How many of you agree with me and versus how many agree with you. In this case, um, the issues were stacked against the issues that mattered to voters in this election were stacked against the incumbent,
Yeah.
regardless of party. It would
And
have been very difficult.
this is not to say that there hasn't also been vitriol and condescension coming from the right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So but if you're at a disadvantage, right? If the cards are stacked against you, your approach to winning an election uh is, you're not going to help yourself by insulting people. So Um, but maybe if you had an overwhelming base of support and you were leading anyways, you might be able to get away with that.
But maybe even then, what's the purpose of it? What's the use
Yeah.
of the vitriol? And on both sides.
Well, yeah. I mean, let's face it. I mean, Trump is probably one of the most vitriolic presidents we've had.
No,
Um,
I'm talking about the
yeah.
supporters, not the
Well, the
candidates.
supporters that, yeah.
Supporters.
Well, yeah, yeah, you're gonna find that on both sides, and it's not a mystery. I mean, it's not anything new. Um, you're always gonna have hard left, hard right, saying the nastiest things about each other.
We have a few minutes left only. Are there any lessons from the national election and from the local election here in Guam that you think the Democrats or the Republicans can learn in the lead up to the 2026 election here in
Um,
here in Guam?
on Guam, I think Frank Blas is right. Um, in the sense that I think people are just kind of tired of fighting. Um, when you're constantly fighting within your own party, or you're constantly fighting with the governor, or
For the
and
sake
so
of
forth,
fighting.
whether she's right or wrong,
Yeah.
uh, it gives the impression to people that you're ineffective in being able to do anything else, doing anything constructive. And I think voters we're just tired of that. Um,
Do you think that Therese Terlahi and Chris Barnett, if they are serious about running for governor and lieutenant governor, now have to show for the next 2 years, have to show a little bit more than just, fighting with the governor?
well, now that they're in the minority, I think it's actually going to be easier for them.
Because the only expectation of them is to be the loyal opposition.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the consequence of the fighting is has already exacted itself,
In
and that is,
Democrats losing.
yeah. So, it now the onus is in whose control, right? Um, it is easy to be a minority senator. It is easy to just sit back and complain, be, when you don't have the votes to do anything, but you can hold the majority accountable, right? Just by complaining. And but yeah, you know, you, I think they'll be a force to reckon with, because they have a considerable following. But they're just not going to be speaker or vice speaker or majority, and so they're not going to be able to frame. And I guess the other thing about it is you're going to have to really, because once they start running, right, whoever is running against them is going to start asking, well, what have you been doing with the time you had when you were in power? And I think that's something that's probably the one thing that I think um, they could be held to account for. So when you did have the opportunity to exact some kind of initiative in the legislature, did you take that opportunity to? Because I don't think that that's something that was talked about too much.
What about there is a significant discussion and theorizing among Republican leaders, not your everyday Republicans, but your people in the party who are at, for lack of a better term, um, underestimating, I think, or just sort of casting aside any sort of chance that Republican gubernatorial candidate Charlie Hermosa might have at winning a primary or general election in 2026. You have any thoughts about that?
Well, uh, I think Charlie is a smart guy. Um, he's seems to be a successful businessman, and I wouldn't discount uh, what he may be able to pull off. Um, depend on obviously. whether he has. I mean, I can see why they would try to kind of just downplay him, and that's simply because he's not an establishment figure in the party. And with that, they probably assume that he has no organization or no base of support. There's still a lot of time. You never know what if he picks a really good establishment running mate, for example,
Mhm.
out from the woodwork. That changes everything, right?
Yeah.
What if he pours in a ton of his own wealth into his campaign?
Mhm.
So even if, you know, yeah, like let's just assume that they're right and he doesn't have the base of support from traditional Guam Republicans. Um, I don't think that I think he'll still be able to influence the outcome of the eventual general election. That's my opinion. If he wants it that bad and he works hard at it, um, I think that he what he does and how he reacts and how he responds after the primary may be a big factor.
Carlos, thank you so much for having this first conversation. I look forward to having more of these podcasts with you.
Yeah.
You have a good day. God bless you, my friend.